We have the last two sessions of the day and power pack session. So we have SoftBank, Swiggy and Delivery on one stage, which I think hasn't happened in a very long time. Actually suggested to Sumer that he can make this a parallel board meeting and, do the conversation himself. But after this, we also have Dr. Devi Shetty, who's arrived. He will be in conversation with his son, Viren Shetty, and that's going to be another special conversation. But thank you so much, Sumer, Harsha, and Sahil, some of the hardest to pin down founders in the ecosystem. Thank you for coming for our event, especially Harsha. So this is like the eighth wonder
Thanks
of the world.
Thanks for having me, Chanda. It's very exciting.
Sahil?
Thanks for having me. I won't say it's very exciting, but thanks for having me.
Right, Sumer, I want to begin with you. Big day for you. Ola Electric's listing. It broke the upper circuit, which I think was way ahead of everyone's expectations. Even if you can't get into the specifics, your own take.
No, I think, look, for
because
us...
it was one of the most anticipated IPOs this year.
No, it probably anticipated also because it's the next wave of tech companies coming, and this FirstCry next week, and then you've got others hopefully coming, and Unicommerce also is coming next week. I think for us, we're one of the largest shareholders of Ola Electric. I think what Bhavesh has done from 2017-18, I think our check went in 2019. What he's created is phenomenal. I think I think the promise he's delivered, the EV revolution, I think that's what got people excited. So the pop is obviously, one day of trading, and you've got, it's a long journey ahead of him, and I think he's super happy, and so are we. But obviously, lots still to do to make it even a larger mission, which is Bhavesh's mission.
Right. I noticed that 3 of your portfolio companies are going public in August, and Peak 15 had 3 consecutive IPOs in May, June. So did you guys have a pact to not interfere in each other's time zones?
I think I just saw they were your sponsors, so we can't do what I say about that. But I think you're giving us too much credit. I think with FirstCry, Unicommerce, Ola Electric, obviously Swiggy is obviously filed as well. So it's more for the entrepreneurs than us.
Right. Sahil, it's been 2 years since you became a listed company?
Yeah, it's about 2 years and 3 months.
You keep track to that level? Do you look at the share price every day?
It's 9 quarters.
Right, but what has changed for you? How has life changed for you? You're used to the quarter tak analyst calls and updates and everything now.
Yeah, we sort of were practicing for this for quite a while before we went public with our board, with Sumer and Kon, our board in any case. And we run a fairly predictable business in some senses. So it's easy for us to kind of explain how our decisions are going to play out to the markets. I think once you get past the shock of your stock price moving up and down on a regular basis, I don't think life's changed all that much. The only difference is now we have to communicate to obviously a much broader set of people than we did in the past. And unfortunately, it looks like everything we say takes on a little more importance than it did when we were private. So we just have to be more careful. But yeah, not much change.
How are the expectations of public market investors different from investors like SoftBank?
They're actually not that different. We found that public market investors are actually as sophisticated as the private investors we dealt with. The reality is, look, it's a pretty simple story. India is an underserved market from a logistics standpoint. Somebody is going to build a very large logistics company in India, probably more than one, maybe probably 3 or 4. And I think public market investors expect that we will be one of the companies that will deliver that. So not really that different from the private markets at all.
Right. Harsha, confidential filing done. How are you preparing? You've expanded your board, hired
We expanded
everything.
our board about 18 months back,
Yeah.
Chanda. So I think we've been preparing to make the company ready. I think it's also been, that part is like a dry run to understand how everything works. So even the compliance, the tech stuff that needed to get ready, the accounting stuff, all of that has been in the works for a while. So yeah, I think we are on our way. We're preparing to go for the final step.
When do you think it will happen? Is there a timeline you have in mind?
No, I can't comment on any timelines, unfortunately, but hopefully soon.
Right. And, Sumer, Sahil, both of them are on your board. What do they tell you about becoming a public listed company? What's the biggest thing you should watch out for? Or you don't have those kind of discussions?
Of course, we have these kind of discussions. We have board meetings, and then there are other meetings. So there's always these conversations. No, I think had long chats with Sahil about his learnings, and Sumer has seen this also through his portfolio companies. No, I think I can't whittle it down to like any such specifics. I think as we go into the next stage, I think obviously performance is paramount. That is the most important thing. Then communicating your strategy transparently, being clear, communicating. Yeah, just communicating clearly is, I think, the next big learning for us. The rest, I don't know if anything should change. If you're focused on, long-term stakeholder value and long-term performance, that part needs to continue. And I think also too, we will have, when we go public, a much wider set of stakeholders than we've had. We would have like maybe 30, 40 investors, small, large, of all types today. But that will expand into thousands, hundreds of thousands, whatever. So I think listening in even more and understanding the parts that are constructive and making sure that we pick them up and act on it to make the business stronger is, I think, another big one that we've learned.
Right. Sumer, how has SoftBank's exit profile been for you compared to other markets? I mean, I think you've fully exited Zomato, PB Fintech, Paytm, Delivery. Also, you've been offloading shares. Give us a sense of that.
No, so I think specifically for the fund, Vision Fund 1 was started in 2017. So I think when all the ducks align and it's a good market for us to exit, it's also where we are in the company life cycle. But we obviously have to return, our funds to our LPs. And so we will exit when we think it's the right time. India has been honestly a phenomenal market for us. I was saying for the Vision Fund, in terms of exits and returns, India is probably right at the top. We've had not only obviously all the public market exits, we had Flipkart when Walmart came in, and also just directionally, if you see the up rounds in a lot of our private companies, I think we can say that the India portfolio is definitely one of the best we have in the Vision Fund.
Right. So if India is such a great market, why are you not investing more? I mean, the SoftBank funding winter has gone on. I'm trying to remember the last fresh investment. Don't tell me Meesho because that's a follow-on. So why does the SoftBank funding winter go on and on and on?
No, I don't think it's a SoftBank funding winter. I think if you see growth equity deals, look, for us, we're not going to do $10 million, $20 million checks. We might do, it has to be a real exception. But if you look at $50 million plus investments in tech, in AI first, tech first companies, I don't think there've been that many in the last 18 months.
So it's a supply issue.
I think it's a supply issue, and I think we go through cycles, and obviously, I think for us, the seed, Series A, Series B, which were done probably in 2015, 16, 17, which became relevant for us to invest in 2019, 2021. Swiggy, Delivery, Policy Bazaar, maybe a little older, but Lenskart, Meesho, etc. And now I think the next cohort, which probably got funded in 2020, 21, they have to be ripe for us now coming. And I think that 2021 there was a hype, so I think the cohorts were large. Maybe the quality, the quality wasn't as good, and that's across the board everywhere in the world. And then you went through this massive kind of lull in 22, 23. So I think that will take a little bit of time to settle itself down. Also, I think a lot of companies, because they know that some have recalibrated, some still want a 21 valuation, and if they do, they're becoming profitable or they're conserving the cash, they're making the cash last longer, so they want to come to market later when they think either the company's grown into a valuation or the valuation environment is better. So we are looking very, very hard. That I can assure you. If you find us a good growth equity $50 million check, we will be very excited.
I heard you were looking very closely at the whole AI infra layer, data centers.
Well,
and
I think that's so. I think you can kind of put it in two lenses. You have obviously, we'll do like we did with Delivery and Swiggy own 15-20% of companies. The infra is more strategic, which is I think a longer term bet which we'll have to think about.
Right. Sahil and Harsha, I wanted to get your views on, the evolution of commerce in the last decade, right? What is your take on this whole debate that's going on quick commerce? Is it taking the share of premium kiranas, older kiranas, or modern retail or e-commerce. Every founder we speak to has a different view. Harsha, maybe you have skin in the game, so you can start and Sahil can add to that.
Yeah, I think obviously we get this question asked a lot. I think if you first think about like who quick commerce serves right today, it is still at the overall category has acquired probably 30, 40 million consumers at the top of the pyramid in India. And if you think about where these users were making their grocery purchases from, there may have been like a very occasional visit to the kirana, but the majority of the grocery purchases would still happen from either large format grocery stores that are modern trade or, for example, e-commerce. And even if you think about the debate, right, there are multiple things that are very different about, let's say, the quick commerce and let's say what even a kirana offers, right? For example, a kirana is all about micro top-up and sachet kind of entry price SKUs, which you would not even find on a quick commerce platform. So those SKUs don't even exist. If you think about the segment as well, like I said, we are at the top of the pyramid, just working for the top 100, 150 million consumers kind of zip code, whereas the kirana is not exactly built for this. And I'll give you a few examples as well, right? A large part of our revenue, sales, everything comes from D2C brands, which are kind of not even existent in the kiranas. They haven't managed to penetrate. I mean, some of them struggle to even penetrate modern trade. So the kirana is not even there. So the offering is entirely different and is built for an audience with a selection that is completely different from
So
what
are
a
you
kirana. The
creating-
proposition is different. The consumer is different. So it cannot be taking share away from kiranas.
So you're saying it's not a market share game. You're creating fresh demand.
See, there is some of that as well. Of course, if you think about, if you ask the folks at Red Bull, if you ask the folks at Quality Ice Cream, if you ask the folks at Coke, you will see that there is so much consumption that is happening incrementally because there are access points available that weren't available.
No,
Some of the
even
SKUs, like an
HUL's CEO,
Epigamia
I think,
yogurt.
spoke about it yesterday, right? He said a lot of HUL's products like noodles and ice cream are sold more on quick commerce.
That's right, and there are some SKUs that are being prepared only for quick commerce to suit the audience that quick commerce is operating on. So I think it's a completely different channel, kind of purpose-built for the top part of the India's pyramid. So I think it's not exactly the same proposition, not built for the same consumer. That's my take on it.
So it won't take away, I don't know, share of DMart or...
Like I said, I think as you go higher, as you go into more large format modern trade stores, there would be some purchases that will have some overlap. But the specific question you asked was a kirana, which it is not.
Right. Sahil?
Yeah, I think it's hard to argue with that, right? It's a nuanced answer, which is essentially some categories are clearly incremental demand and there's new demand coming in, which hasn't been there in the past. But as quick commerce proceeds, I think the reality is that the supply chain is going to rearrange itself. And the reality is that it is going to impinge on traditional retail, whatever it is. It doesn't have to be just kiranas. It will be organized retail, for example, or modern retail, which also will be affected by quick commerce. I think we're some distance from that just yet. It's a narrow set of customers with a very specific value proposition, likely to be some amount of incremental demand. But I think as quick commerce grows, there will naturally be a rearrangement of the entire supply chain.
Right. You addressed some part of it, I think, last week where you introduced rapid delivery for D2C brands in, 3 to 4 hours. Is that the segment you will play in, not the 15 to 20 minutes dark store part?
Yeah, that's the segment. Ours is aimed less so at extremely high frequency orders like Swiggy has, for instance, or like a Blinkit would have, but more for e-commerce brands who also want to create a direct offering with their customers. So they could store at our dark stores across cities, and then we can do sort of up to an 8-kilometer or 10-kilometer kind of delivery on the... So think of it as faster same day. So that's essentially what the service is designed for. And then they can sell not just on quick commerce, but they can sell on their own channel. They can sell sort of directly to their customers or whatever they need to do. So it's a completely different offering from traditional quick commerce.
Do you see it replacing traditional e-commerce? Because, I don't know, they are expanding categories. Now you can order, I think, Hamleys from Instamart and iPhone from Blinkit and so on.
Yeah, it's kind of funny that we've reached the stage of calling it traditional e-commerce, no? About 10 years. Yeah, life comes at you fast. I think in some categories it's inevitable. The reality is that if you go to consumers, I've never heard a consumer say, it's the old Jeff Bezosism, right, which is consumers are never going to say they want things slower. in reality. So I think for some categories where the supply chain can be architected to deliver faster, in some cities for certain categories, for certain kinds of products, this is an inevitable outcome. And it will certainly move away from classic sort of big box marketplace e-commerce towards this. But that's it, I've said this before, the vast majority of e-commerce as it evolves is long tail. And in India, it's not just long tail, it's also long tail and low value. And that doesn't lend itself easily to this format of delivery.
Right. So has it surprised you in a sense, how this model is able to survive in India when it hasn't worked elsewhere in the world?
I think also...
But you also had advantage because I think Swiggy literally built Instamart.
And
Yeah.
Swiggy, and these guys were, obviously way ahead of the curve, the way they thought about it. Obviously now it's become a lot broader, SKUs, etc. But it was supposed to be what Harsha was saying, the top up. I think when we sat on the Swiggy board and we saw it, being through inception, I'm not actually that surprised because I think, at least for me, the journey of Swiggy started from 2015, and that itself surprised me like humongously, right? There was a product didn't exist. You went from 800 orders a day to 2 million plus or whatever the number is orders a day. You then added a delivery fee, then you added a platform fee, and just suddenly the consumer was willing to pay. And so at least my belief always when Harsha and Swiggy started Instamart, and it was a question of will people pay the extra fee, does it really matter? I was kind of more optimistic. Obviously to get to the unit economics which works was always you needed large volume. But having seen the success of Swiggy, food delivery, the willingness of the consumer to pay, the willingness of tier 2 cities outside the top 7 to pay, I actually thought this could make a lot of sense.
Right. Harsha,
Some of this also, Chandra, to add to Sumay's point, actually the model and like its market fit are very different from other parts of the world. Like I said, in India, this version of something purpose built for, let's say, the urban consumer, the top 100 million consumer, doesn't exist in India. But it exists in other parts of the world. That's a big difference. You will find a 7-Eleven in a bunch of places whenever you go to a London, to a Singapore, to a New York. So that was already, there was a form of this convenience left. The other big difference is also that in the other parts of the world, quick commerce kind of was built only as a top-up based experience, which is a much thinner selection. I think here the category has evolved very differently, where the lines start blurring between just going for a distress purchase versus also building a dependence on even larger baskets, which has changed the viability of the model.
right. Harsha, if I look at how Swiggy has evolved in the last decade, right? In a sense, you were the first mover in many of the categories that you are in. I mean, you started food delivery first. Zomato didn't believe in food delivery for many years. And it was the same with quick commerce, right? You built Instamart literally from the ground up, and then they made acquisition, and then Zepto came in, and so on. So you were the first mover in both categories. But, have you been able to sustain that first mover advantage?
I think we would have it much harder if we didn't have the first mover advantage. That's for sure. I think being at the forefront of it, being able to pioneer some of these categories is the oxygen, that is the long-term oxygen for the company also. We actually pride ourselves on that tinkering culture. And I think it's 10 years, many cycles, many learnings. And we're obviously going to put all of that to work as we think about the next innovation, and then some more, and then some more after.
But what else do you see? What's the next big bet for you?
That's the reality about innovation. You don't know what it is going to be before you put it out there. Unfortunately, we have to put 10 things out there and 9 out of them die, and finally there's one that shows up, and that's how the cycle operates. So we'll keep tinkering, and we won't know till the consumer votes with their thumbs that, hey, this is an innovation that I want.
So is Swiggy still the leader in, food delivery, say, in the South, in quick commerce in the South? Because your rivals have been making noises that perhaps they are the leader.
Unfortunately, I can't comment on any market share yet. As you just congratulated me in the beginning, we just confidentially filed, so...
But having a listed competitor, is it a good thing or a bad thing? The good thing is, shareholders know this business. They know what metrics to expect. They know what is GOV, etc., what to expect. But the flip side is your competitor has been profitable for 5 quarters in a row. And, you're not profitable yet. what kind of pressure does it put on you?
Right, like you said, it's a good thing and a bad thing, and there's a net. That was the question. I think, of course, even general for, let's say, companies, tech companies that have gone public, there's a much better understanding of how these new age tech companies operate. There are lots of unknowns that are slowly becoming knowns to the regulators, to the market. With us having a benchmark means that we don't have to explain what on-demand means, what gig worker economy means, what hyperlocal means. All of these are positives. And I think the negatives are obviously quarter to quarter you are going to be compared on the trajectory. And we definitely want to make sure that it's a good trajectory, and there will be many quarters that are good, maybe some that are off, but I think it's a net positive for sure.
Right. Whichever, top categories there are in India, it's mostly been a duopoly, right? I mean, if, for payments, it's what, PhonePe, Google Pay, mobility, Uber, Ola. And for food delivery, it's largely been Zomato, Swiggy. Do you see quick commerce being a multi-player category? I mean, is there space for 4, 5, 6 quick commerce apps?
It's very hard to predict that right now, Chandra. We are in like year 3.5 of quick commerce. If you ask me, year 3.5 of food delivery, there were many more competitors at the time. So it's really hard to tell. I think the category is still playing out. I think the penetration is still in early stages. Many things will happen in the next few years, and I have no crystal balls.
Right. Sahil, your fortunes in a sense are tied to how the e-commerce industry performs, and that itself is tied to macros and consumption and so on. The last year hasn't been great for e-commerce. It's slowed down. How is this fiscal looking like?
Obviously, I can't make forward-looking statements, but that said...
No, in terms of the overall sentiment.
Yeah, no, to be clear, look, first of all, I think it's a little bit of a miss that our fortunes are dependent on e-commerce. The reality is it's about half our revenues today, from being about 100% of our revenues maybe 4 years back. We've been pretty clear about one thing. The value of delivery is not just in the parcel delivery service we provide for e-commerce, but in the fact that we're the largest integrated logistics company. And India spends over 200 billion on logistics overall. It's nice to say we're the largest player in this space, but we're $1 billion and change in revenues. So I don't think we're indexed to sort of what happens to e-commerce in any given year. I think the e-commerce market will do what it does. It's of course dependent on consumption, top of the funnel. And when it grows, we're the lowest cost service provider with the widest reach. So, we'll continue to gain share. What we're really worried about is making sure that we provide a high quality of service in what is becoming an increasingly variable operating environment. And when we do that, we gain share in freight, we gain share in warehousing, we gain share in supply chain services, which are all much larger than the e-commerce market. So our fortunes are more sort of linked towards our ability to gain share from the unorganized market in those sectors. And e-commerce is where we began and what we're best known for, but we're not really as dependent on it as you think.
Right. What in your mind is the biggest business risk for you? Is it, more of the clients you work for investing in their own captive logistics, for instance, like what Meesho has done?
No, not too many of our clients have the, how should I put it, the
wherewithal,
fluidity in their strategy. And nobody in their right mind will build a logistics company, right? So there's only 3 e-commerce companies which have tried it. So no, I don't think that's a big risk for us overall on e-commerce either. The reality is the 3 big players have done what they had to do. We're more than probably half of the third-party logistics market. So not too concerned about that. The biggest risk for us is execution, right? It's an execution-heavy business. We have to build warehouses, we have to operate trucks, we have to employ 75,000 people. That's the real risk in our business.
Right. Final couple of minutes. So, from all 3 of you, your views on the current state of the Indian startup ecosystem. Is the momentum back? At least from a tech IPO perspective, it's been a very good year. Sumer, you can start.
I think for me, I don't know why they call it the startup ecosystem. I don't think there's startups anymore. I think it's center of plate, it's established, it's going to take more and more market cap. The mutual funds have understood it, the public market has understood it. So it's really going to be center of plate for India. So I think that's what's exciting. There's, like Harsha was saying, you don't have to keep explaining things again and again. I think what's required more is where's the next Harsha, where is the next Sahil?
Have you found them?
Looking hard. You keep asking. That's why we haven't put the 50 million. So we're looking. And that flow needs to continue. for, let's say, at least, I don't know, in 5 years, we are a $5.5 trillion market cap. Today, the NSE, 25% of that should be tech. And for that, we need a lot more of that pipeline to come through.
Sahil?
Yeah, I don't know if I'm qualified to answer that question on the state of the
You're a
Indian
listed
startup
company only
ecosystem.
for some 2 years.
State of the Indian startup ecosystem is probably fine, I'm sure.
No, but give us an overview. I'm sure you read about startups.
Honestly, I try not to, but no, look,
Sahil makes a great point. I agree with him.
you've called the wrong two people for this conversation. I'm sure it's okay. There are a lot of companies which are starting up in interesting spaces in D2C, etc. We see it from a logistics standpoint. A lot of interesting logistics tech companies, but that's all I know. I'm really not qualified to answer that.
Right. Harsha?
I agree with Sahil.
Always agree with your board member. That's a good strategy. But as we wrap up, Sumer, as someone who's seen Harsha and Sahil over the years, what's the one thing that has changed about them? What's the one thing that hasn't changed about them? This wasn't part of your question list, so you have to tell me on the spot.
Okay. What's changed about Harsha is, I don't know, too thoughtful. I think he's getting ready to go public, so he's being more measured in the way he answers.
But hasn't he always been very zen?
No, he's been zen. But that doesn't mean, like, I think he was a little more, like, you know, you could get more answers out of him, more direct answers. Now he's, you know, of potentially billions and billions of market caps, he has to be more thoughtful. I think what's not changed...
No pressure, Harsha.
I think what's not changed, which is obviously remarkable, and I think that's what the upcoming entrepreneurs need to learn, is, you know, what you see is what you get. There's this huge amount of humbleness, which is not changed from when I first met him in a bungalow in Koramangala, I think. You know, and that was the boardroom and his office and his home, I think. So, Sahil, I think, is what's not changed is I think he is one of the most data-driven entrepreneurs I've met. Every answer is lack of emotion and very data-driven, which is good because you know, that's how you build a hardcore, like you said, a very heavy logistics business. What's changed is that
He's
you know,
based in Goa.
as a public market entrepreneur, he finally has to come out and give interviews, which I know he doesn't like doing.
We are glad he does that now. Dr. Devi Shetty is here for his next session, but before we begin that, I'm going to, ask Sahil and Harsha, what's the one thing that has changed and the one thing that hasn't changed about Sumer? Except for the fact that he moved from Norwest to SoftBank.
You first.
Should I start a timer for this question?
This is the hardest question of the evening. No, I think what I appreciate the most, and that hasn't changed, is Sumer is super direct. I think it's just very taxing for an entrepreneur to second guess and read an investor's mind as you go along. And I think that is one of the biggest things that builds trust in relationships. Things may be up, things may be down, but keeping it real for each other is the backbone of a good founder-investor relationship. And I'm pretty lucky to have that, and that hasn't changed through all of these years. What has changed?
He's based in London.
Yeah, that's a big one.
No, but you tell me, what has changed? Sumer, you need to spend more time with both of them.
That's true.
Struggling to think of changes.
Looking sharper.
On that note, thank you very much.
So much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.